I walked in still wearing my graduation gown when my mother grabbed the cake I had bought with my own paycheck and dropped it straight into the trash. The chocolate frosting splattered against the garbage bag as she made her declaration loud enough for everyone on her family FaceTime call to hear. "You don't deserve a party," she announced, her voice dripping with the same dismissive tone I'd heard my entire life. My sister Macy laughed from somewhere in the background, that sharp giggle she always used when I was being humiliated. My brother Tyler looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to defend me. I clutched my diploma like a shield, the official paper that proved I had actually accomplished something despite receiving zero support from the people who were supposed to love me most. The black cap sat crooked on my head, and my gown was wrinkled from the long ceremony where I'd sat alone in the family section. "Only real achievements get celebrations," my mother added, delivering her final jab with surgical precision. The words hit harder than anything she'd said before, cutting through years of conditional love and constant comparison to my siblings. I took a slow breath, processing the moment that would change everything between us. Then I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I finally understood exactly who she was. Before I tell you how this all started, I need a favor from everyone watching this. Comment below where you're watching from because I want to know how far this story travels. And please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button because what happened next is something I never expected, especially not from my own family. This isn't just about a graduation party or a cake in the trash. This is about what happens when the people who are supposed to celebrate your victories become the ones trying to convince you that you don't deserve to win. My name is Emma, and I'm 18 years old. For most of my life, I believed my mother when she told me I wasn't special, wasn't talented, and wasn't worth the same attention she gave my siblings. I accepted being invisible in my own family. What you're about to hear might sound impossible, but I have pictures, videos, and witnesses for every single thing that happened. Sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the most true. Some families lift each other up when someone succeeds. Others tear down anyone who threatens to outshine the chosen favorites. This story doesn't start with the cake in the trash. It starts long, long before that moment, with years of being treated like I didn't matter. Growing up in our house was like living under a spotlight that never quite reached where I was standing. When Macy won her middle school science fair, our mother threw a celebration dinner with extended family and posted dozens of photos on social media. When Tyler got his first summer job, she bought him a car as a reward and bragged to neighbors about his work ethic. When I made honor roll for 3 consecutive semesters, I got a nod. Maybe. If she wasn't too busy discussing Macy's latest accomplishment or Tyler's newest achievement. The pattern was so consistent that I started to believe it was normal for families to have one child who simply mattered less than the others. My mother had a phrase that became the soundtrack of my childhood: try to be more like Macy. She said it when I brought home report cards, when I showed her art projects, when I tried to share something I was proud of. Nothing I did was ever quite good enough to earn the same enthusiasm she showed my siblings. I learned to celebrate my own victories quietly, in my bedroom with the door closed, because sharing them publicly only resulted in comparison to whatever Macy or Tyler had done better. The phrase would haunt me for years. At my part-time job at Pinewell Market, the dynamic felt depressingly familiar. I worked there 3 days a week after school, stocking shelves and helping customers while saving money for college expenses my parents wouldn't cover. My coworker Andrew was everything I wasn't: loud, confident, and completely comfortable taking credit for other people's ideas. When I suggested reorganizing the store layout to improve customer flow, I mentioned it casually during a staff meeting. 2 weeks later, Andrew presented his innovative reorganization plan to our manager, complete with detailed diagrams and projected efficiency improvements. The manager praised Andrew's initiative and gave him a small raise for thinking strategically about store operations. I watched from behind the checkout counter as Andrew accepted congratulations for implementing my idea, feeling the familiar sting of being overlooked while someone else received recognition for my work. I said nothing, just as I'd been trained to do at home. I observed everything, documenting the pattern of being ignored while others advanced using my contributions. One afternoon, Andrew accidentally revealed his true opinion of me when he thought I couldn't hear. "Don't worry about Emma," he told another coworker. "She's like the invisible girl around here anyway." One customer changed everything, though I didn't realize it at the time. Mrs. Hollis was an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes who came into the store every Tuesday to buy groceries and chat with whoever was working the front counter. She always asked about my school, my plans, my thoughts about various topics. Unlike most adults in my life, she actually listened to my answers and asked follow-up questions that showed she cared about my responses. "Emma, dear," she said one Tuesday afternoon, "I'm organizing a neighborhood youth project to help kids with tutoring and community service. Would you be interested in volunteering? We need someone reliable who understands how to connect with young people who might feel overlooked." The invitation surprised me. Nobody had ever asked for my help with something that mattered, something that could actually make a difference in people's lives. I was used to being assigned tasks, not being invited to contribute my ideas and abilities. "I don't know if I'm qualified," I replied honestly. "I'm not really a leader or anything special." Mrs. Hollis smiled warmly. "Sometimes the best leaders are people who understand what it feels like to be underestimated. Think about it." I said yes before I could talk myself out of the opportunity. The youth project became my sanctuary and my education in leadership. I helped design tutoring schedules that actually worked for kids with complicated family situations. I organized neighborhood cleanup days that brought together families who had never spoken before. Most importantly, I learned to talk to young people who felt ignored at home, kids who recognized something familiar in my quiet confidence. My approach was different from the loud, commanding style that people usually associated with leadership. I listened more than I spoke. I asked questions that helped kids discover their own solutions. I created safe spaces where being thoughtful was valued more than being the loudest person in the room. The changes were gradual but significant. Kids started showing up consistently to tutoring sessions. Test scores improved. Families began participating in community events. The project was succeeding in ways that surprised even Mrs. Hollis, who had experience with youth programs. "You have a gift for this," she told me after a particularly successful event where shy teenagers had opened up about their struggles and goals. "You make people feel seen and heard." My confidence began growing in ways I had never experienced before. For the first time in my life, I was valued for qualities that felt authentically mine rather than being criticized for not being more like someone else. The turning point came when a city council member attended one of our community events. Councilwoman Martinez walked through our tutoring center, observing the organized chaos of teenagers working on homework while volunteers provided patient guidance and encouragement. She spoke with several families about the impact the program had made on their children's academic performance and social development. Parents shared stories about kids who had gained confidence, improved their grades, and started believing in their own potential. After the event, Councilwoman Martinez approached me with genuine curiosity about my role in the program's success. When Mrs. Hollis explained that I had designed most of the organizational systems and served as the primary coordinator for youth engagement, the councilwoman's expression shifted to obvious interest. "You should meet Mayor Collins," she said, handing me her business card. "He loves community-driven students who understand how to create real change. I think he'd be very interested in your approach to youth development." My mother happened to overhear this conversation from across the room, and her laugh was loud enough to interrupt other discussions. "Don't get your hopes up, Emma," she called out dismissively. "Politicians say things like that to be polite." I made the appointment anyway, despite my mother's prediction that nothing would come of it. Mayor Collins' office was nothing like I expected. Instead of feeling intimidating and formal, it was warm and welcoming, filled with photographs of community events and thank you letters from local organizations. The mayor himself was a middle-aged man with an easy smile and the kind of presence that made you feel like your opinion actually mattered. He greeted me with genuine enthusiasm, not the polite tolerance I usually received from adults in positions of authority. Councilwoman Martinez told me about the youth project you've been coordinating, he said, settling into a comfortable chair across from where I sat. I'd love to hear your perspective on what makes community programs successful. For the next hour, I found myself sharing ideas I'd never been able to express before. I talked about the importance of listening to young people rather than talking at them. I explained how creating consistent, reliable support systems could transform kids who had been written off by traditional programs. Mayor Collins asked thoughtful questions and took actual notes during our conversation. He treated my ideas with the kind of serious consideration I had never received from family members or teachers. I'd like to invite you to volunteer on a city initiative we're launching, he said finally. We need someone who understands community engagement from the ground up. I accepted quietly, knowing this opportunity would change my life. Graduation week arrived with all the chaos and exhaustion that comes with finishing high school while working part-time and maintaining my volunteer commitments. I studied for final exams while pulling extra shifts at Pinewell Market, trying to save as much money as possible for college expenses. I received no help from home during this crucial time. No rides to late-night study sessions, no encouragement about my achievements, not even a clean, quiet space where I could focus on preparing for exams that would determine my academic future. My mother was too busy planning celebrations for Macy's latest academic success and Tyler's upcoming promotion at his summer job. Their accomplishments filled our dinner conversations while my approaching graduation was treated like a routine obligation rather than a meaningful milestone. When the final grades were posted, I discovered I had finished as valedictorian runner-up, an achievement that represented years of quiet determination and self-directed effort. I had succeeded despite receiving no support, recognition, or encouragement from the people who should have been my biggest advocates. I told my mother about my academic ranking that evening, expecting at least some acknowledgement of what I had accomplished through sheer persistence and hard work. She shrugged and said, "That's nice, honey. Can you help me plan Tyler's celebration dinner this weekend?" The morning after graduation, my mother posted a series of family photos on her social media accounts that told the story of our family's academic achievements. The pictures showed her beaming proudly with Macy and Tyler, celebrating their various accomplishments with elaborate displays of parental pride. The caption read, "So proud of my 2 stars. These amazing kids continue to exceed every expectation and make me the proudest mom in the world." I scrolled through every single photo, looking for any image that included me or acknowledged my graduation. There were 17 pictures total, and I appeared in exactly 0 of them. My achievement had been completely erased from the family narrative. The omission was deliberate and cruel. I had been standing right next to them during several of the photo opportunities, but I had been cropped out or simply not included in shots that were clearly meant to showcase family success. Macy's comment on the post made everything worse, "Perfection. Love our little family so much." Friends from school started texting me, asking why I wasn't in any of the graduation celebration photos they'd seen online. I didn't know how to explain that my family had decided I wasn't worth including in their version of our story. When I finally gathered the courage to ask my mother about the missing photos, her response was swift and brutal. "Stop making everything about you, Emma," she snapped, not even looking up from her phone where she was reading congratulatory comments about Macy and Tyler. "You're lucky you even graduated with the amount of time you waste on those community projects instead of focusing on your real responsibilities. Some people earn celebrations, and some people just get by." The humiliation burned through me like acid. I had worked harder than both my siblings combined, juggling school, work, and volunteer commitments while they pursued their interests with full family support and financial assistance. "I was valedictorian runner-up," I said quietly, hoping that reminding her of my academic achievement might change her perspective on my worthiness for inclusion. "Second place," she replied dismissively. "Exactly what I expected. You never quite managed to reach the top, do you?" Her words were designed to wound, and they succeeded completely. I walked to my room feeling smaller than I had since elementary school, when her criticisms first taught me that I was somehow fundamentally different from my siblings. That's when my phone buzzed with a text message that would change everything. The message was from Mayor Collins, and seeing his name on my phone screen felt like a lifeline during the worst moment I'd experienced in years. Congrats on graduating. I heard you finished as valedictorian runner-up. Fantastic achievement. Are you free tomorrow afternoon? I have something important I'd like to discuss with you. My mother happened to be standing nearby when I received the text, and she read it over my shoulder before I could close the phone. Her reaction was immediate and predictable. Some automated nonsense, she scoffed, rolling her eyes at what she assumed was a form letter sent to local students. Politicians have interns who send these generic congratulations to make themselves look good. Don't get excited about nothing. But I recognized the personal tone of the message and remembered the genuine interest Mayor Collins had shown during our previous conversation. This wasn't a form letter. This was a real invitation from someone who had actually noticed my achievements. I replied immediately, confirming that I would be available to meet the following afternoon. Whatever the mayor wanted to discuss, it had to be better than staying home where my accomplishments were treated like inconvenient interruptions to my family's celebration of everyone else. I went anyway, despite my mother's certainty that nothing meaningful would come from the meeting. Mayor Collins' second invitation exceeded anything I could have imagined. When I arrived at his office the next afternoon, he had a folder of documents spread across his desk and the kind of focused energy that suggested important business rather than polite conversation. Emma, I want to ask you something significant, he began, gesturing for me to sit down across from him. The city is hosting a youth initiative celebration next weekend to recognize young people who have made meaningful contributions to their communities. He paused, studying my expression carefully. We'd like you to be our featured speaker. Your work with the Neighborhood Project has been exactly the kind of community engagement we want to highlight and encourage. My mouth fell open. Speaking at a city event meant standing in front of hundreds of people, representing the kind of youth leadership that local government wanted to promote. It meant being recognized publicly for the work I had poured my heart into. The event is Saturday afternoon, he continued, the same weekend as graduation celebrations. We want to honor you specifically for succeeding despite challenges that might have stopped other students. The timing was perfect in the cruelest possible way. While my family refused to acknowledge my graduation, the city wanted to celebrate everything I had accomplished. I would be honored to accept, I said, my voice stronger than it had been in months. I walked out of Mayor Collins' office with a clarity I had never experienced before. I was done begging for applause from people who refused to give it. I was finished trying to earn recognition from family members who had already decided I wasn't worth their attention or pride. The speaking engagement represented something much bigger than a single event. It was validation from people who had actually observed my work and found it valuable. It was recognition based on merit rather than favoritism or family politics. I decided to accept the mayor's offer completely, with full commitment to representing myself authentically rather than trying to be someone my mother might finally approve of. For the first time in my life, I would speak publicly about my own achievements without downplaying them or deflecting credit to others. The Youth Initiative celebration would become my graduation party, hosted by people who understood that my accomplishments were worth celebrating. I would finally have the recognition ceremony I deserved, surrounded by community members who had witnessed my contributions firsthand. My mother's opinion about my worthiness had lost its power over me. The world beyond our house was bigger than her narrow vision of success, and I was ready to step into that larger world with confidence. My mother's reaction to news about the speaking engagement was explosive and immediate. When I told her about Mayor Collins' invitation, she erupted with the kind of anger usually reserved for major family crises rather than opportunities for recognition. "You're trying to embarrass us," she screamed, her face flushing red with genuine outrage. "You think you're special now because some politician is using you for a photo opportunity? You're making our family look desperate for attention." Macy immediately chimed in with her support for our mother's position. "Mom's right, Emma. You should probably stay low-key about this stuff. People will think you're trying too hard to be important." Their coordinated attack felt familiar and predictable. anytime I showed signs of confidence or received recognition from outside our family. They worked together to diminish my achievements and convince me that I was overreaching or misunderstanding my place. This is bigger than you understand, my mother continued, her voice growing louder and more aggressive. When you embarrass yourself publicly, it reflects on all of us. Think about someone other than yourself for once. I listened to their arguments with surprising calmness, finally understanding that their opposition had nothing to do with protecting me and everything to do with maintaining their control over my self-perception. I packed my graduation gown into a bag and left the house quietly. The night before the Youth Initiative celebration, I found myself in Heritage Park, practicing my speech under the streetlights while Mrs. Hollis sat on a nearby bench serving as my patient audience. I had spent hours crafting words that would capture my experience of finding purpose through community service while navigating family dynamics that discouraged ambition or recognition. The speech needed to inspire other young people who might feel unsupported at home while remaining honest about the challenges of pursuing goals without encouragement. They don't see you for who you really are, Mrs. Hollis said gently after I finished my final practice run. But others do. Tomorrow, you'll speak to people who understand exactly what you've accomplished and why it matters. Her words carried the weight of someone who had observed my growth from uncertain teenager to confident community leader. She had watched me develop skills and discover strengths that my own family refused to acknowledge. I have something for you, she said, reaching into her purse and pulling out a small package wrapped in white tissue paper. For tomorrow, when you're representing all of us who believe in your potential. She handed me the gift with the kind of ceremony that suggested it held special significance beyond its modest appearance. Inside the tissue paper was a small golden pin shaped like an open book, delicate and beautiful in its simplicity. The craftsmanship was exquisite, with tiny details that caught the light and seemed to shimmer with possibility. This pin belonged to my grandmother, Mrs. Hollis explained, her voice soft with memory. She gave it to me when I graduated from Teachers College, back when women weren't always encouraged to pursue education. She told me it was for those who rise despite the weight. I held the pin carefully, understanding immediately that this was more than jewelry. It was a symbol of perseverance, a tangible connection to generations of women who had succeeded despite facing discouragement from people who should have supported them. Your family doesn't understand what you've built, Mrs. Hollis continued, but that doesn't diminish the value of your work or the strength it took to persist without their encouragement. Tomorrow, when you speak, you'll be carrying the hopes of everyone who has ever felt invisible. I pinned the golden book to my dress carefully, feeling its weight against my heart like armor made of recognition and hope. The next morning arrived with sunshine and the largest crowd I had ever seen gathered for a community event. Stepping onto the stage felt like entering a completely different world from the one where my achievements were ignored or minimized. The audience was enormous, filled with families, community leaders, and young people who had come to celebrate the kind of leadership that actually made a difference in people's lives. Stage lights warmed my face as I approached the podium, and I could see hundreds of expectant faces looking up at me with genuine interest and respect. This was the recognition ceremony I had dreamed of, hosted by people who understood that my accomplishments were worth celebrating publicly. Mayor Collins stepped forward to introduce me, his voice carrying clearly through the sound system as he began outlining my contributions to youth programming and community development. But from my position on the stage, I could see something that stopped my heart completely. In the front row, sitting between two city council members, was my mother. Her expression was one of pure shock, as if she couldn't believe that the daughter she had dismissed as unworthy of celebration was being honored by the highest levels of local government. She had come to see what I had been invited to do, probably expecting to witness my failure or embarrassment. Instead, she was about to hear the mayor of our city praise my leadership in front of hundreds of people. Mayor Collins' introduction exceeded every fantasy I had ever had about receiving public recognition for my work. His words carried the authority of someone who had observed my contributions firsthand and found them genuinely valuable. This young woman achieved everything you see in our youth programs without support, without privilege, and without applause from the people who should have been her biggest advocates, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the afternoon air. Yet she still rose to create programs that have transformed lives and strengthened our entire community. My mother's face drained of color as the implications of his words sank in. He wasn't just praising my current achievements. He was acknowledging that I had succeeded despite receiving no encouragement or support from my family. Emma Torres represents the kind of leadership that emerges when young people decide to serve others regardless of whether anyone is watching or celebrating their efforts, Mayor Collins continued. Her work demonstrates that true leadership comes from character rather than recognition. Camera flashes began popping in my mother's direction as local news photographers documented the event. Her shock was becoming part of the public record, preserved forever as evidence of the moment she realized her daughter was being honored by people who actually understood her value. The applause was thunderous as Mayor Collins gestured for me to step forward and address the crowd. I took the microphone with steady hands and looked out at an audience that had gathered specifically to celebrate the kind of work my family had dismissed as insignificant. For the first time in my life, I was speaking to people who believed my voice mattered. Some of us grow up in silence, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. Some of us succeed with no cheering section, no encouragement, and no one telling us that our dreams are worth pursuing. But success earned quietly is still success. The crowd was completely engaged, and I could see heads nodding throughout the audience as people recognized the truth in my words. Many of them had probably experienced similar challenges, finding their own paths to achievement despite lacking support from the people closest to them. Community service taught me that my value isn't determined by who celebrates me, but by how I choose to serve others who might need encouragement that I never received, I continued. When we lift up people who feel invisible, we discover that we're not invisible either. The response was immediate and overwhelming. People stood and clapped and cheered with the kind of enthusiasm I had only imagined receiving. My words had connected with their experiences, creating a moment of shared understanding and mutual recognition. A reporter approached as I left the stage, notebook in hand and clear interest in my story. The reporter introduced herself as Amanda Foster from the local newspaper, and her questions revealed genuine curiosity about my background and the community programs I had helped develop. "I'd love to feature your story in this weekend's paper," she said, taking notes as we spoke about my experience balancing school, work, and volunteer commitments while building youth programs that had exceeded everyone's expectations. "Your approach to community leadership is exactly what our readers need to hear about," Amanda continued. "Young people who succeed despite obstacles inspire others to persist through their own challenges." But then she mentioned something that made my heart skip a beat. "We're also planning to feature photos of each youth leader on the city's main billboard downtown. The display will run for a full month as part of our community leadership campaign." My mother happened to be standing close enough to overhear this conversation, and I watched her expression shift from confusion to something approaching panic as she realized the scope of recognition I was receiving. A billboard meant that thousands of people would see my face and story every day for a month. It meant my achievements would be impossible to ignore or minimize, displayed prominently for the entire city to see. My mother's eyes met mine across the crowd, and for the first time in my life, I saw something that looked like fear in her expression. After the event ended, my mother approached me with an urgency I had never seen before. She grabbed my arm gently but insistently, her voice taking on the artificial sweetness she used when she wanted something important. "Sweetie. Honey," she said, the pet names flowing like syrup after years of calling me by my first name only. "Let's take a nice family photo together. I'll make you a proper graduation party when we get home. We can fix this whole situation." Her panic was obvious and desperate. She had realized that her public dismissal of my achievements was about to become part of a documented story that would reflect poorly on her parenting when people learned how little support I had received at home. "I'll invite all our relatives," she continued, her voice becoming more frantic as she outlined her sudden desire to celebrate accomplishments she had dismissed just days earlier. "We'll make it special, just like Macy and Tyler's parties." But her words rang hollow after years of consistent neglect and recent cruelty. Her desire to fix this wasn't about recognizing my worth, It was about protecting her reputation when the community learned how she had treated her most accomplished child. I gently pulled my arm away from her grasp, finally understanding that her approval was no longer necessary for my happiness. 2 days later, my picture appeared on the giant billboard downtown, larger than life and impossible to miss for anyone driving through the city center. The image showed me at the Youth Initiative celebration, holding my Golden Book pin and smiling with genuine confidence. The caption read, "Local graduate leading the future, Emma Torres, community youth advocate." My mother saw the billboard while driving to work, and according to Tyler, she slammed on the brakes so hard that the car behind her honked angrily. She sat in traffic staring up at my face, finally understanding that my achievements had become too public and too prominent for her to dismiss or ignore. The billboard represented everything she had told me I would never accomplish. It was proof that my quiet persistence and community service had earned recognition from people who mattered, displayed for the entire city to see. Phone calls started coming to our house from relatives, neighbors, and family friends who had seen the billboard and wanted to congratulate my parents on having such an accomplished daughter. Each call forced my mother to explain why she had never mentioned my achievements before. Her carefully constructed narrative about our family's success was crumbling under the weight of public evidence that she had overlooked her most accomplished child. The fallout was swift and comprehensive. People began asking my mother pointed questions about why she had never celebrated her daughter's obvious achievements. Social media comments on her graduation post started reflecting confusion about my absence from family celebrations. She went into damage control mode, deleting posts, rewriting captions, and trying to revise history to include acknowledgement of my accomplishments. But the internet never forgets, and screenshots of her original posts were already circulating among people who knew our family. Meanwhile, the city invited me to join their newly formed Youth Advisory Board, a position that would give me influence over programs affecting young people throughout our community. The role came with a small stipend and direct access to city leadership on issues I cared about. I accepted the position immediately, understanding that it represented the beginning of a career in public service that would allow me to support other young people who might feel overlooked or undervalued at home. My mother's opinion about my qualifications no longer mattered. I had found my place in a larger community that recognized and valued the contributions she had spent years dismissing. The transformation was complete, documented in newspaper articles and preserved on billboards for everyone to see. 6 months later, I walked past that billboard again, sunlight catching the edges of my photograph and the Golden Book pin that had become my symbol of rising despite the weight. The Youth Advisory Board had become the foundation for bigger opportunities. I was applying to colleges with full scholarships based on my community service record. I was speaking at regional conferences about youth leadership development. Most importantly, I had learned that my worth wasn't determined by my family's recognition or approval. I had discovered that the world was full of people who would celebrate authentic achievement and genuine service to others. I turned toward the camera one final time to share the most important lesson I had learned through this journey. Sometimes the family you're born into won't clap for you when you succeed. They might even try to convince you that your achievements don't matter or that your dreams are unrealistic. That's okay. The world is bigger than your living room. I walked away from the billboard, free and calm and finally celebrated by people who understood what I had accomplished despite every obstacle placed in my path. The woman who said I didn't deserve a graduation party had been proven wrong by an entire city that thought I deserved recognition on the largest scale possible.